They say the devil lives in Boston, but he doesn't wear a cape or carry a pitchfork. He wears a three-piece suit, and his name is Orally Vane. On the night of November the 14th, the entire police scanner for District 4 went silent. Not because there was no crime, but because the police were told to look away. Why? Because a waitress named Clara was found bleeding in an alleyway, and when Orally Vane saw her face, he didn't call an ambulance. He made a phone call that locked down the entire eastern seaboard. By dawn, every man in the city didn't just fear for his job, he feared for his life. This isn't a fairy tale. This is what happens when you touch the only thing a monster loves. The rain in Boston didn't wash things clean. It just made the grime slicker. Clara Mitchell hated the rain. It meant the wealthy patrons of the Obsidian, the city's most exclusive underground lounge, would track mud across the marble floors she had just polished. It meant her tips would be damp, and her walk to the bus stop at 3 a.m. would be miserable. Clara was 23, invisible and exhausted. She wasn't the type of girl men wrote sonnets about. She was the girl who remembered that Mr. Henderson liked his bourbon neat, and that the terrifying man in booth 4 didn't like to be asked if he wanted a refill. He would simply nod when he was ready. Booth 4. That was Orally Vane's table. Everyone knew the name Vane. It was stitched into the city's infrastructure like a cancerous thread. Construction shipping waste management, if money moved in Massachusetts, a Vane took a percentage. Orally was the youngest head of the family in history, taking the throne after his father's unfortunate heart attack 3 years ago. Tonight, the air in the Obsidian felt heavy. It was a Thursday, usually a quiet night, but the VIP section was packed with sons of senators and hedge fund managers trying to play gangster. Clara, the floor manager, a nervous man named Sapphire, hissed, "Table 7 needs a bottle of Dom. Move!" Clara nodded, pushing a stray lock of dark hair behind her ear. Her feet throbbed. She grabbed the tray, navigating through the haze of cigar smoke. Table 7 was occupied by Derek Hollis. Derek was the son of a tech mogul, the kind of boy who thought the world existed to be bought. He was drunk, his tie loose, surrounded by sycophants laughing too hard at his unfunny jokes. "Here you are, gentlemen," Clara said softly, setting the champagne down. Derek looked up. His eyes were glassy and red-rimmed. He didn't look at the bottle. He looked at her. Not at her face, but at the curve of her neck. "You're new," Derek slurred, reaching out. His hand clamped around her wrist. It wasn't a caress. It was a shackle. "I've been here 6 months, sir," Clara said, her voice steady, despite the spike of fear in her chest. "Please let go." "Don't be brinkum," Derek sneered, pulling her an inch closer. The champagne bucket rattled on the tray. "How much to get you to skip the rest of your shift? My friends and I are going to a penthouse in Seaport. Better view than this dungeon." "I'm not for sale, Mr. Hollis." Clara tried to twist her arm free, but his grip tightened. His fingernails dug into her skin, sharp enough to bruise. The music in the club was loud, a heavy bass thumping against the walls, masking the interaction. But Clara felt a sudden drop in temperature. It wasn't the AC. From across the room, in the shadows of booth 4, Orally Vane stood up. He didn't rush. Orally never rushed. He moved with the predatory grace of a panther stalking through tall grass. He buttoned his suit jacket, a charcoal grey bespoke piece that cost more than Clara's life earnings. Derek didn't see him coming. He was too busy smirking at Clara's struggle. "Let her go." The voice wasn't loud. It was a low rumble, like distant thunder that promises a storm. Derek froze. He looked up, squinting. When he recognized orally, the color drained from his face so fast, it looked like a magic trick. "Mr. Vane," Derek stammered. We were just joking, right, sweetheart?" He dropped Clara's wrist like it was burning hot. Clara stumbled back, clutching her arm. There were 4 red crescents etched into her pale skin. Orally didn't look at Derek. His eyes, the color of frozen steel, dropped to Clara's wrist. He stared at the marks for a full 5 seconds. The silence that radiated from him was deafening. Even the music seemed to fade into the background. "Go to the back, Clara," Orally said. He didn't look at her face. He was still staring at the injury. "I'm fine, sir," she whispered, terrified of causing a scene. "Go." It wasn't a request. Clara fled. She hurried through the kitchen doors, her heart hammering against her ribs like a trapped bird. She stayed in the break room for 20 minutes, shaking. When Sapphire finally came in, he looked pale. "You can go home," Sapphire said, avoiding her eyes. "But my shift, Mr. Vane paid for your time, and everyone else's. He closed the club early." Clara blinked. He closed the club. "Just go, Clara. Take the back exit." She didn't argue. She changed into her oversized coat, grabbed her purse, and slipped out the heavy steel door into the alleyway. The rain had turned into a deluge. The alley was dark, illuminated only by a flickering yellow security light. Clara pulled her collar up, keeping her head down. She just wanted to get home, feed her cat, and forget the way Orally Vane had looked at her wrist. She didn't hear the footsteps until it was too late. "Thought you could get me embarrassed in front of the king, huh?" The voice was wet and slurred. "Derek." Clara spun around, gasping. Derek was standing there, but he wasn't alone. 2 of his friends were behind him. They looked nervous, but Derek looked unhinged, fueled by humiliation and cocaine. "Mr. Hollis, please," Clara said, backing up until her spine hit the wet brick wall. "I didn't do anything." "You made me look weak," Derek spat. He stepped forward, closing the distance. Orally Vane doesn't give a damn about a waitress. He just likes to swing his dick around. He's gone now, and you owe me an apology. Clara tried to run. She feinted left and tried to sprint past him, but Derek was faster than he looked. He grabbed her by the hair, yanking her back with a savage force that made her vision white out. She screamed, but the heavy rain drowned it out. He threw her against the dumpsters, her head cracked against the metal. The world spun. She tasted copper. "Hold her," Derek ordered his friends. "Derek, man, this is too much," one of them said. "Shut up, do it." Clara fought. She scratched and kicked, connecting with a shin, but a fist collided with her ribs, knocking the wind out of her. She crumpled to the wet pavement. Derek loomed over her, breathing hard. He raised a boot. "This," he grunted, kicking her in the stomach, "is for the attitude." Pain exploded in her midsection. She curled into a ball, wheezing. "And this," he grabbed a jagged piece of a broken glass bottle from the ground, "is so you remember your place." The last thing Clara felt was a searing hot agony slicing across her arm, the same arm he had grabbed earlier. Then a heavy blow to her temple sent her into the darkness. The silence was the worst part. Clara woke up to the feeling of cold water soaking through her jeans. Her head felt like it had been split open with an axe. She tried to move, but her body screamed in protest. She was alone in the alley. Derek and his friends were gone. She tried to push herself up, but her arm gave way. She looked down. Her grey coat was stained black in the darkness. Blood. So much blood. "Help!" she croaked, but it came out as a whisper. She heard the sound of a car engine. Powerful. Close. Headlights swept into the alley, blinding her. A sleek black car, an armoured Audi, rolled to a stop 10 feet away. The engine cut. For a moment, Clara thought Derek had come back to finish the job. She tried to crawl behind the dumpster, dragging her injured leg. The car door opened, expensive leather creaking. Steps, slow, deliberate steps, splashing in the puddles. A figure towered over her, blocking out the rain. "Clara!" The voice wasn't slurred. It was the low rumble of the storm. O'Reilly. She looked up. Through her swollen eye, she saw him. He wasn't wearing his jacket anymore. He was in his white dress shirt, his holster visible under his left arm. He looked down at her, and for a second, his face was a mask of pure, unadulterated horror. Aurélien Vane dropped to his knees in the filthy alley water. He didn't care about his $1,000 trousers. "Don't touch me," Clara whimpered, flinching. "Please." O'Reilly froze. His hands hovered over her, trembling. Not with fear, but with a rage so potent it made the air vibrate. "I'm not going to hurt you," he said, his voice terrifyingly calm. "I need you to tell me where it hurts the most." "Everywhere," she sobbed. He gently, so gently it broke her heart, brushed wet hair away from her face. He saw the bruise blooming on her cheekbone. He saw the cut on her lip. Then his eyes traveled down to her arm. The sleeve was shredded. The gash was deep. O'Reilly went still. He looked like a statue carved from ice. He took off his white shirt, just stripped it off right there in the rain, revealing a torso mapped with scars and tattoos. He wrapped the expensive silk around her arm, tying it tight to stop the bleeding. "I'm sorry," she whispered. "I'm sorry I caused trouble." Aurélien stopped. He looked into her eyes. His irises were swirling with violence. "You apologize?" he asked softly. "You are bleeding on the pavement, and you apologize to me." He scooped her up. He lifted her as if she weighed nothing. Clara rested her head against his bare chest. He was warm, impossibly warm. She could hear his heart beating a slow, heavy thud. He carried her to the car. He didn't put her in the back seat. He sat in the back and pulled her onto his lap, cradling her against him. "Drive," he ordered the driver. "Hospital, the private wing. Call Dr. Aris. Tell him if he isn't there in 5 minutes, I will burn his practice to the ground." The car tore out of the alley. Clara was fading. The adrenaline was wearing off, leaving only the cold. "Stay with me," Aurélien commanded. He was holding her face with one hand, his thumb stroking her uninjured cheek. "Clara, look at me." She forced her eyes open. "It hurts." "I know." He pulled her closer. His jaw clenched so hard, a muscle feathered in his cheek. "I need you to tell me a name." "Aurélien, give me the name Clara." She hesitated. She knew what giving him a name meant. It meant death. But she remembered the laugh, Derek's laugh as he kicked her. "Hollis," she whispered. "Derek Hollis." O'Reilly closed his eyes. He exhaled a long, shaky breath. When he opened them again, the humanity was gone. The man holding her was gone. The monster had taken the wheel. He pulled out his phone. He dialed a number. "It's Vane," he said. The tone of his voice made the driver flinch. "Wake up the Reapers. I want the city sealed. Nothing leaves. No planes, no trains, no boats." He paused, listening to the person on the other end. "I don't care if his father is a senator," Aurélien snarled. "I want him found, And I want him alive. If anyone touches a hair on his head before I get there, I will kill them myself." He hung up and looked down at Clara. She was shivering violently. "Who did this to you?" he asked, though he already knew. He just needed to say it. He needed the universe to hear the accusation. "Derek," she murmured, her eyes sliding shut. Aurelie pressed a kiss to her forehead. It was a promise, a blood oath. "Sleep now, little bird," he whispered against her skin. "By the time you wake up, the world will be a very different place." The emergency room at St. Jude's Medical Center was usually a chaotic mess of overdoses and car accidents, but at 4 a.m., the entire East Wing was silent. O'Reilly had bought the silence. He stood in the hallway staring through the glass window of room 304. Inside, nurses were adjusting IV drips. Dr. Aris, the best trauma surgeon in the state, was stitching Clara's arm. O'Reilly was still shirtless, his chest smeared with Clara's blood. He hadn't washed it off. He wanted to feel it drying on his skin. He wanted to remember the metallic smell of it. "Mr. Vane," a voice came from behind him. It was Elias, his second in command. Elias was a giant of a man, an ex-Marine with a scar running down his neck. He held out a fresh black shirt and a towel. Aurelie took the towel and wiped his hands, but he ignored the shirt. "Status," Aurelie said. "We have the ports locked down. The airport security is on our payroll. They've grounded all private flights." "But," Elias hesitated. "But what?" O'Reilly turned. His eyes were dead. "Derek Hollis isn't at his apartment. We tracked his phone. It's dead. His father, Senator Hollis, just put a call into the police commissioner. He knows something is happening. He's claiming his son is being targeted by extremists." O'Reilly laughed. It was a dry, humorless sound. "Extremists. That's a new one. The senator is threatening to bring in the feds orally. If we do this, if we touch the son of a sitting senator, we are inviting a war we might not win." Aurelie walked up to Elias, invading his personal space. "Look through that window, Elias." Elias looked. He saw the small, frail girl in the bed, hooked up to machines. "That girl," Aurelie said, his voice dropping to a whisper, "makes the coffee I drink every morning. She remembers that I hate small talk. She has never asked me for a dime. Tonight, I watched a piece of filth break her because he thought she didn't matter." Aurelie turned back to the window. "If we don't burn the world for the things we love, Elias, then why are we kings? I don't care about the feds. I don't care about the senator. Find the boy." Elias nodded, understanding. "We got a ping on one of Derek's friends, the one who was with him, a kid named Toby. He's trying to buy a bus ticket to Providence." "Bring him to the warehouse," Aurelie said. "I have some questions. And Derek." "Derek is running," Aurelie said. "Rats always run when the lights come on. Put a bounty on him. 5 million. Alive." Elias's eyes widened. 5 million. Every hitman from here to Chicago will be tearing the city apart. "Good," Aurelie said. "Let them fear. By dawn, I want every man in this city to know that if they touch what is mine, there is no hole deep enough to hide in." The warehouse in the South Boston shipyard smelled of rust and old seawater. It was a place where things went to disappear. Aurelie walked in the heels of his Italian shoes, clicking against the concrete. In the center of the vast empty room, a single chair sat under a hanging bulb. Tied to it was Toby, the boy who had been with Derek. He was 19, wearing a varsity jacket, and currently sobbing so hard he was hyperventilating. Elias stood guard, arms crossed. He hasn't stopped crying since we picked him up. O'Reilly approached the chair. He didn't yell. He didn't strike. He simply pulled up a metal crate and sat down directly in front of the boy, crossing his legs. "Toby," O'Reilly said. The boy's head snapped up. "I didn't do it. I swear, Mr. Vane, I didn't touch her." "It was all Derek. I tried to stop him." "I know," O'Reilly said calmly. "If you had touched her, you wouldn't be sitting in a chair. You would be in the harbor." Toby hiccuped, hope flaring in his terrified eyes. "But," O'Reilly continued, his voice dropping an octave, "you watched. You stood there and watched a woman bleed because you were too afraid of a senator's son to do the right thing. Cowardice is a sin, Toby, and tonight I am the priest." O'Reilly leaned forward, resting his elbows on his knees. "Where is he?" I don't know. He ran." O'Reilly sighed. He reached into his pocket and pulled out a lighter. He flicked it open, the flame dancing in the drafty room. "I don't have time for lies, Toby. My patient is bleeding out in a hospital bed across town. Every second you waste is a second I get closer to losing my temper." "He went to the lake house!" Toby screamed, shrinking away from the tiny flame. "His dad's place in the Berkshires. He said his dad has a panic room there." "Please, that's all I know." O'Reilly snapped the lighter shut. He stood up. "The Berkshires," O'Reilly mused. 3 hours away." He turned to Elias. "Get the car and call the boys. We aren't taking a stealth team. We're taking a caravan." Just then, Aurelie's phone buzzed. It was an unknown number. O'Reilly answered. "Speak." "You have made a grave mistake, Mr. Vane." The voice was cultured, smooth, and aged. Senator William Hollis. "Senator," O'Reilly said, walking toward the exit, leaving a sobbing Toby behind. "I was wondering when you'd call. I assume you know your son is a dead man walking." "My son is a troubled boy who made a mistake," the senator said, his voice tightening. "He does not deserve to die for a bar fight. Call off your dogs, O'Reilly. If you step foot on my property in the Berkshires, you won't be dealing with local police. I have Blackwater contractors on site. Federal contacts are on standby. You come for him, and you lose your empire. Is a waitress worth your kingdom?" O'Reilly paused at the warehouse door. He looked out at the rain, which was still falling in sheets. He thought of Clara's hand, how small it looked, wrapped in his bandages. He thought of the way she whispered, "I'm sorry," while bleeding. "You think this is about a waitress, William?" O'Reilly asked softly. "This is about consequence. You raised a wolf who thought he could eat the sheep without fear, but he forgot that the sheep belong to the shepherd." "You are signing your death warrant," the senator threatened. "Then bring a coffin," O'Reilly said. "Make it a double, one for me and one for your son." He hung up and threw the phone into the harbor water. "Elias," O'Reilly barked. "Load up. We're going to war." The Hollis estate was a fortress hidden deep in the woods of western Massachusetts. High stone walls, iron gates, and cameras covering every inch of the perimeter. At 3 a.m., the convoy of black SUVs rolled up the winding driveway. They didn't sneak in. They drove right up to the front gate with headlights blazing. O'Reilly sat in the lead car. He checked his gun, a matte black custom 1911. "There are 6 guards at the gate," Elias said from the driver's seat. "Mercenaries, high grade." "Go through them," O'Reilly ordered. The SUV accelerated. The gate guards raised their rifles, shouting orders to stop. The first shot shattered the windshield of O'Reilly's car, embedding itself in the bulletproof glass. "Now," O'Reilly yelled. The sunroofs of the 3 SUVs behind them popped open. O'Reilly's men emerged, returning fire with suppressed assault rifles. It was precise, brutal efficiency. The guards at the gate didn't stand a chance against the sheer ferocity of the Vane syndicate. The gate was rammed open by the lead truck. The convoy roared onto the manicured lawn. Aurelie stepped out of the car before it had even fully stopped moving. The mansion loomed ahead, dark and imposing. "Secure the perimeter," Aurelie shouted to his men. "No one leaves." He walked toward the front door. Gun drawn. Elias and 2 other enforcers flanked him. The front door exploded inward before they could touch it. The mercenaries inside were firing through the wood. Aurelie ducked behind a stone pillar. Bullets chipped away the masonry near his head. "Flashbang!" Elias yelled, tossing a canister through the broken door. Boom! A blinding white light. Aurelie moved. He swept into the grand foyer, stepping over the dazed mercenaries. He fired twice, double taps efficient and lethal. He wasn't killing for sport. He was clearing a path. He moved through the house like a wraith. The kitchen, the library, the drawing room clear. He found the entrance to the panic room behind a bookshelf in the study. It was a heavy steel door, coded and reinforced. "It's locked tight," Elias said, examining the keypad. "We need a drill. It'll take an hour." "I don't have an hour," Aurelie growled. He stepped up to the steel door and banged the hilt of his gun against it. "Derek!" he roared. The sound echoed through the house like a gunshot. "I know you can hear me. Open this door, and I promise you a quick death. Keep it closed, and I will burn this house down with you inside." Silence. Then the intercom crackled. "You're insane." Derek's voice came through, trembling but arrogant. "My dad's chopper is 5 minutes out. You're trapped, Vane. The feds are coming. You're done." Aurelie laughed. He leaned his forehead against the cold steel. "You think your father called the feds?" Aurelie asked, his voice low. "Your father didn't call the feds, Derek. He called me 5 years ago, when he needed money to run his campaign. He called me when he needed his mistress's accident to disappear." Aurelie signaled to Ellis, who handed him a bag of C4 plastic explosive. "Your father isn't coming to save you," Aurelie shouted as he molded the clay onto the door hinges. "He's trying to clean up a mess, and right now you are the mess." Aurelie stepped back. "Fire in the hole." The explosion shook the foundations of the house. Dust and smoke filled the room. The heavy steel door groaned and fell inward with a deafening crash. Aurelie walked through the smoke. Derek was huddled in the corner of the panic room holding a small pistol. He was shaking so badly he could barely hold it up. "Stay back!" Derek screamed. Aurelie didn't stop. He walked right up to the gun barrel. He reached out, grabbed the slide of the pistol, and wrenched it from Derek's grip, tossing it aside like a toy. Derek scrambled back, pressing himself against the wall. "Please, I have money, I have." Aurelie grabbed him by the throat and slammed him against the wall. "You hurt her." Aurelie hissed his face inches from Derek's. "Why?" Derek's eyes were wide, weeping. "I didn't mean to. She was just a waitress. Why do you care? She's nobody." "She is everything," Aurelie roared. He raised his fist. "Wait!" Derek shrieked. "Wait! It wasn't just me. I was told to do it." Aurelie froze. His fist hovered in the air. "What? My dad?" Derek sobbed. "My dad told me to go to the Obsidian. He told me to pick a fight. He said he needed a distraction. He said if I caused a scene, you'd be focused on me, and he could move the shipment through the docks tonight." The air left the room. Aurelie slowly lowered his hand. He released Derek's throat, letting the boy slide to the floor. It was a setup. Clara hadn't just been a victim of a drunk boy. She had been collateral damage in a political game. Senator Hollis had used his own son as bait to draw Orali away from the city so he could move illegal cargo through Vane territory without inspection. The rage that filled Orali now was cold. It wasn't the fiery anger of a lover. It was the glacial, calculated wrath of a king. "Your father," Aurelia said quietly, "sent you to die." Derek looked up, confusion and heartbreak mixing on his face. "No. He said he'd protect me." "He used you," Aurelia said. "He knew I would come for you. He sacrificed his pawn to save his queen." Aurelia turned his back on Derek. "Elias," Orali said into his radio, "don't kill the boy." "Sir, tie him up. Put him in the trunk. We aren't done." Orali walked out of the panic room, stepping over the debris. "Where are we going?" Elias asked, meeting him in the hallway. Orali checked his watch. It was 5 a.m. Dawn was breaking. "The senator thinks he's won," Orali said, his eyes dark. "He thinks I'm chasing a ghost in the woods while he moves his shipment. We are going back to the city. We are going to the docks." He paused, looking back at the shivering boy being dragged out by his men. "And then," Orali added, "I'm going to pay the senator a visit. I'm going to return his son, and I'm going to show him exactly what happens when you break my things." The Boston shipping yards were a graveyard of steel and salt. It was 5:45 a.m. The time of day when the city is greyest, caught between the death of the night and the birth of the morning. A thick, briny fog rolled off the Atlantic, obscuring the rows of rusted shipping containers that stacked high into the sky like jagged teeth. Aurelie Vane stood on the corrugated metal roof of Warehouse 4, the wind whipping his coat around his legs. Beside him, Elias adjusted the scope of a long-range rifle, peering down into the canyon of Dock 4. Below them, the scene was a hive of illicit activity. It wasn't a drug deal. It was something far more desperate. Men in unmarked tactical gear, private military contractors hired by the highest bidder, were frantically moving heavy waterproof crates from the hull of a battered fishing trawler into the back of 3 armored transport trucks. "I see it," Elias murmured, the lens of his scope reflecting the dull morning light. "It's not product, boss. It's bearer bonds, gold bars, cash. Senator Hollis isn't smuggling. He's liquidating. He's cashing out the city's infrastructure fund to bankroll his run for governor." Aurelie stared down, his eyes devoid of any warmth. "He didn't just sell his son," he said, his voice a low rumble that vibrated in his chest. "He sold him for a campaign slogan." Aurelie checked his watch. "Cut the lights." Elias spoke a single code word into his headset. Instantly, the high-powered floodlights that illuminated Dock 4 sizzled and died. The yard plunged into a chaotic gloom. Down below, shouting erupted. The mercenaries raised their rifles, spinning in circles, blinded by the sudden shift in lighting. "Execute," Aurelie whispered. From the shadows of the shipping containers, the Vane syndicate emerged. They didn't scream. They didn't charge like barbarians. They moved with the terrifying, synchronized discipline of a wolf pack. The sound of suppressed gunfire ripped through the humid air. Thwip, thwip, thwip. Aurelie descended the rusty fire escape, his polished shoes ringing against the metal. He walked straight into the kill zone. He didn't run. He didn't take cover. He moved with a terrifying calm, a predator walking through a herd of prey. A mercenary lunged from behind a forklift, raising a submachine gun. Aurelie didn't even break stride. He raised his custom 1911 and fired twice, one in the knee, to drop him one in the chest to silence him. He stepped over the groaning man as if he were a puddle. The firefight was brutal and short. The senator's men were fighting for a paycheck. Orali's men were fighting because they feared their king more than death. Within 3 minutes, the dock was silent, save for the groans of the wounded and the lap of the ocean against the pier. Orali walked toward the lead-armored truck. The engine was revving. The driver was trying to smash through the blockade of vain SUVs. Orali fired a single round into the front tire. The massive vehicle lurched, skidded sideways, and slammed into a stack of pallets. The door flew open. Senator William Hollis tumbled out into the mud. He was wearing a trench coat over his pajamas, clutching a leather briefcase to his chest, like a life preserver. He looked up, his distinguished, silver-haired face smeared with grease and terror. When he saw Orali Vane standing over him, the senator scrambled backward, his heels slipping in the muck. "Orali," the senator gasped, holding up a hand. "Wait. Let's talk. I can make you rich. I have contacts in D, so I can give you the ports. All of them." Orali stared at him. The disgust on his face was absolute. "You think I came here for money, William?" "Everyone wants money," the senator shrieked. "Take half. Take the whole briefcase. Just let me leave." Orali signaled to Elias. "Bring the car." Elias drove Orali's black-armored SUV right onto the pier, the tires crunching over the debris. He stopped 10 feet away and popped the trunk. 2 of Oralia's enforcers dragged Derek Hollis out. The boy was a wreck, battered, bruised his varsity jacket, torn his wrists bound with zip ties. He was weeping, broken by the night's events. When Derek saw his father, he stopped struggling. A look of confused relief washed over his swollen face. "Dad," Derek croaked, stumbling forward. "Dad, you came. I told them you'd come." Senator Hollis froze. He looked at his son, then at Orali, then at the briefcase full of millions. The calculation in his eyes was visible. It was cold. It was political. "Derek," the senator stammered, backing away toward the edge of the pier. I'm glad you're safe, but I have to go. You understand, don't you, the campaign? The family legacy." Derek stopped. The relief on his face shattered, replaced by a horror so profound it looked physical. You're leaving me with him." Orali stepped between them. He pulled a knife from his belt and sliced the zip ties on Derek's wrists. "Tell him, William," Orali said, his voice echoing off the metal containers. "Tell your son why he was at the Obsidian last night. I sent him to have a drink." The senator lied, his voice high and shrill. "Liar!" Orali snarled. He turned to Derek. "He sent you to provoke me. He needed a distraction. He knew if you touched my waitress, I would hunt you. He knew I would leave the city to find you. He served you up on a silver platter to keep my eyes off this shipment." Orali took a step closer to the senator. "He counted on you dying, Derek. A grieving father polls better than a scandalized one. You were just a sacrificial lamb for the governor's mansion." Derek looked at his father. He looked at the briefcase the senator was still clutching, so tightly enough to turn his knuckles white. "Is that true?" Derek whispered. "Dad, you knew he would come for me." "It's complicated, son," the senator yelled, panic taking over. "You've always been a screw-up. I needed the capital. I did it for us." "For the name. For your name," Derek screamed. Orali pulled the gun he had taken from Derek earlier, the small chrome pistol the boy had tried to use in the panic room. He racked the slide, chambering around. He held it out, handle first, to Derek. "He left you to rot in a panic room," Orali said softly to the boy. "He didn't call the police. He didn't call the feds. He was halfway to the Cayman Islands while you were begging for your life." Derek took the gun. His hands were shaking violently. He looked at the man who raised him, the man who had taught him that money solved everything. "No," the senator whispered, raising his hands. "Derek, listen to me. He's a criminal. I'm your father." "You're not a father." Derek spat tears streaming down his face, mixing with the blood. "You're just a politician." Derek raised the gun. O'Reilly turned his back. He didn't need to watch. He began walking toward his car, the sound of his footsteps steady on the pavement. Bang! The shot rang out sharp and final. The seagulls on the nearby pilings scattered screeching into the grey dawn. O'Reilly didn't flinch. He didn't look back to see the senator's body hit the water, or to see Derek drop to his knees, sobbing into his hands. O'Reilly opened the car door. "Elias," he said, his voice weary. "Call the press. An anonymous tip. Senator Hollis was caught in a crossfire during a drug deal gone wrong involving his estranged son. Ruin the reputation. Bury the legacy." "And the boy?" Elias asked, looking back at the weeping figure on the dock. "He stays," O'Reilly said. "He has to live with what he did. That is a punishment worse than death." He slid into the leather seat, the adrenaline finally leaving his system. The monster receded, and the man returned. The image of the senator's greed faded, replaced by the memory of a girl in a hospital bed. "Take me to St. Jude's," O'Reilly ordered, closing his eyes, "and drive fast." The world didn't come back all at once. It returned in fragments. First there was the smell, not the metallic tang of blood or the sour stench of the wet alleyway, but something clean, sharp, like antiseptic and expensive lilies. Then the sound, the rhythmic, hypnotic beep, beep, beep of a heart monitor, the hum of central air, the distant muffled sound of traffic that felt miles away. Clara Mitchell forced her eyes open. Her eyelids felt heavy, as if weighted down by lead coins. The light in the room was dim, the blinds drawn against the morning sun. She tried to take a deep breath, but her ribs screamed in protest, a sharp, hot lance of pain that made her gasp. "Easy," a voice commanded. "Do not move." It was a voice she knew, a voice that usually sounded like thunder, now reduced to a jagged whisper. Clara turned her head to the left. The movement made the room spin, but when her vision cleared, her heart skipped a beat. Aurelie Vane was sitting in a stiff hospital chair, pulled right up to the edge of her bed. But this wasn't the Aurelie she knew from the Obsidian. The impeccable armored king of Boston was gone. In his place was a man who looked like he had walked through hell and decided to stay there. His tuxedo shirt was unbuttoned at the collar, the expensive white silk stained with dried, rust-colored blood. His jaw was dark with stubble. His hair, usually slicked back with military precision, was falling over his forehead. But it was his eyes that frightened her. They were bloodshot wide and fixed on her face with a terrifying intensity. He looked like a man who hadn't blinked in 48 hours. "Aurelie," she croaked. Her throat felt like sandpaper. He moved instantly. He didn't just stand. He surged forward, grabbing a plastic cup of water with a straw and bringing it to her lips. His hands, she noticed, were trembling. The hands that could dismantle a pistol in seconds were shaking as they held a cup of water. "Drink," he murmured. Slowly. She drank. The cool water was the best thing she had ever tasted. When she pulled away, he set the cup down as if it were made of fragile glass and immediately took her hand in his. His grip was tight, desperate. "You're here," she whispered, looking at the blood on his shirt. "You're hurt." "This isn't mine," he said, his voice flat. He didn't look at his shirt. He couldn't stop looking at her, scanning her face, as if checking for cracks. "I'm fine. You stopped breathing in the ambulance, Clara." The words hung in the air, heavy and cold. Clara blinked, the memory of the alley rushing back. The rain, the boot, the glass. Derek's laugh. "I thought I died," she admitted softly. "You almost did." Oralie brought her hand to his face, pressing his lips against her knuckles. He kept them there, his eyes closing. She felt a shudder run through his massive frame. "I tore the city apart, Clara. I broke every rule I ever made, and all I could think about was that I was too late. Derek," she started, her heart rate spiking on the monitor, "is handled." Oralie cut in his tone, hardening instantly. He pulled back, his eyes turning to steel. "The threat is gone. It has been erased from the earth." Just then the door to the private suite opened. Elias walked in. The giant enforcer looked tired, but when he saw Clara was awake, he let out a breath he seemed to have been holding since yesterday. He was carrying a tablet. "Boss," Elias said quietly, "the news is breaking." Oralie didn't look away from Clara. "Show her." Elias hesitated, then walked to the side of the bed and held up the screen. It was the front page of the Boston Globe. The headline was bold black and screaming. "Senator Hollis dead in Port Authority shootout. Link to drug cartels suspected. Son Derek Hollis taken into federal custody." Clara read the words, but her brain struggled to process them. Senator Hollis, one of the most powerful men on the eastern seaboard. Dead. "You did this," she whispered, looking from the screen to Oralie. "Oralie, you killed a U.S. senator." "He was moving stolen bearer bonds," Oralie said calmly, as if discussing the weather. "He used his son to lure me away so he could move his shipment. He let you get hurt. He ordered you to be hurt just to create a distraction." Oralie stood up then. He loomed over the bed, his presence filling the sterile room. "I told you, Clara, if they touch what is mine, I will burn the world." The senator thought his title would protect him. He thought the law applied to me. Oralie's lip curled. "He was wrong." Clara looked at him. She should have been terrified. She was looking at a mass murderer, a man who had declared war on the government for the sake of a waitress. But she didn't feel fear. She felt a profound, overwhelming sense of safety. For the first time in her life, she wasn't the invisible girl. She was the reason the city was burning. "And Derek?" she asked. "He is alive," Oralie said, though the word clearly tasted bitter to him. "He is in federal custody. He will spend the next 30 years in a cell knowing that his father used him as bait. Death would have been a mercy. I didn't feel like being merciful." Clara lay back against the pillows, her mind reeling. "Everyone will know it was you. Everyone who matters knows," Oralie said. "The police know. The feds know. But they won't touch me. Because the senator was dirty, and I have the evidence to prove it. I did their job for them. By tomorrow, I won't be a suspect. I'll be a concerned citizen who tipped them off." He reached into the pocket of his bloodied trousers and pulled out a set of heavy brass keys. He placed them on the bedside table next to the morphine drip. "What are these?" Clara asked. "I fired Sapphire," Oralie said. Clara blinked. "The manager. He let you walk out that back door. He knew Derek was waiting. He was a coward." Oralie tapped the keys on the table. "These are the keys to the obsidian and the deed to the building." "Oralie," Clara started trying to sit up again, ignoring the pain. "I can't. That's insane. I'm a waitress." "No," Oralie said firmly. He leaned down, placing a hand on either side of her head, boxing her in. His face was inches from hers. "You are not a waitress. You are the woman who brought the vain syndicate to its knees without firing a shot. You are the only person in this city who sees me Clara, not the money, not the monster. Me." He brushed a thumb over her bruised cheekbone. "I don't want you serving drinks anymore," he whispered. "I want you to own the place where they are poured. I want you to walk into that room and know that no one can ever make you feel small again. I am giving you a kingdom, little bird. All you have to do is learn to fly." Clara looked at the keys. They were cold and heavy. They represented power. They represented a life she never thought she could have. A life of danger, yes, but a life of respect. She looked up at Aurelie. She saw the question in his eyes. He was offering her a way out or a way in. She could take a payout and disappear to a farm in Vermont. Or she could take the keys. She reached out with her uninjured hand and curled her fingers around the brass. "I don't know the first thing about running a club," she whispered. A slow, wolfish grin spread across Auralie's face, the first genuine smile she had ever seen him wear. "I'll teach you," he promised. "I'll teach you everything." 6 months later. The reopening of the Obsidian was not just a party. It was a coronation. The winter had turned to spring, and the Boston air was crisp and clear. Outside the club, a line of black limousines stretched down the block. Paparazzi were fighting for position behind the velvet ropes, their flashbulbs popping like strobes in the night. Inside, the transformation was absolute. The basement lounge was no longer a dungeon of smoke and shadows. It had been reborn. The walls were upholstered in deep emerald velvet. The floors were black marble that shone like water, and the lighting was warm, golden, and flattering. On the mezzanine balcony overlooking the sea of dancers, Clara stood watching her empire. She wore a backless gown of liquid silver that clung to her curves like a second skin. Her dark hair was swept up, revealing the long, elegant line of her neck. But she didn't hide the scar. The jagged, pale line that ran down her left forearm was visible for the world to see. Some women would have covered it with long sleeves or makeup. Clara wore it like a diamond. It was the mark of her survival. It was the receipt for the price that had been paid for this life. "They're afraid of you," a voice rumbled in her ear. Aurelie stepped up behind her. He slid his arms around her waist, pulling her back against his chest. He felt solid, warm, and immovable. He was wearing a bespoke tuxedo, looking every inch the king of the city. "Let them be afraid," Clara said, her voice steady and cool. She leaned back into him, resting her head on his shoulder. "Fear keeps the glass from breaking." She looked down at the crowd. She saw the new police commissioner raising a glass of scotch. She saw business tycoons who used to snap their fingers at her for a refill now looking up at the balcony with reverence. She saw Sapphire's replacement, a sharp woman named Beatrice, managing the floor with military efficiency. Clara wasn't serving the champagne anymore. She was the one they were toasting. "Do you regret it?" Aurelie asked softly, his lips brushing the sensitive spot behind her ear. "The normal life, the quiet." Clara thought about it. She thought about the bus rides in the rain. She thought about the invisibility. Then she looked at the man holding her, the man who had destroyed a dynasty, because she had scraped her knee. "I never had a normal life, Aurelie," she said, turning in his arms to face him. She placed her hands on his chest, feeling the steady thud of his heart. I was just waiting for my life to start. O'Reilly stared down at her, his eyes full of a dark, consuming worship. "And has it?" "It has," she whispered. He kissed her then. It wasn't the tentative kiss of a suitor. It was the claiming kiss of a husband, a partner, a lover. It happened in full view of the club. The music seemed to swell the bass, vibrating through the floorboards. Below them, the city of Boston continued to spin. Deals were made in the shadows, money changed hands, and secrets were whispered in the dark. But up on the balcony, the king and queen stood untouchable. Aurélie Vane had been feared for a decade. But as he looked at Clara glowing in the golden light, he knew the truth. He used to be the most dangerous man in the city because he had nothing to lose. Now, he was the most dangerous man in the world because he had everything to lose. And God help anyone who tried to take it from him again. Clara pulled back, breathless, her lipstick slightly smudged. She smiled, a dangerous, beautiful curve of her lips that matched his own. "Come on, Mr. Vane," she said, taking his hand and leading him toward the stairs. "The music is playing, and I think this is our song, and that My Friends is the story of Clara and O'Reilly. It's a reminder that sometimes the monsters in the stories aren't the ones hiding under the bed. They're the ones burning down the castle to save the princess. But in this story, the princess didn't just get saved. She got the keys to the kingdom. If you enjoyed this roller coaster of a mafia romance, please destroy that. Like button, it really helps the channel grow. Don't forget to subscribe and turn on notifications so you never miss a twist. I have a story coming up next week about a bodyguard and a thief that you absolutely won't want to miss. Thanks for listening, and I'll see you in the next video.